Yay. Streaming.
It's happening.
Okay. So welcome to everybody who is here with us for episode 4 of Sacred Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. So this space has been created so that we can come together as a group of women, men, if you join us, who are here to embody and teach the sacred work of the divine feminine. So by breaking the taboo around all the things sacred, especially the things that were previously not cast as sacred, by talking about these things, we're able to begin to break down the barriers and the walls around them being taboo. And we are given the space to come back to acknowledging these practices as what they are, which is that they're sacred. What you'll hear a lot of us talk about in these sessions is the sacred work of the divine feminine. And a lot of people will say, well, what does that look like? So that can look like things under the umbrella of sacred sexuality, herbalism, women who are showing up as artists, musicians, dancers, metallurgy, astrology, crystal work, womb wisdom, astrology, energy worker, healers. All of this falls under the umbrella of the divine feminine. And the work that these women are doing under this umbrella of the divine feminine is with an intention and under the name of truth, love, and for the greatest good of humanity. Part of my belief is that our world has been greatly disconnected from the sacred experience of life. And so for me, my mission is to be here as a voice of truth, for me personally through love and pleasure practices, and to break the binds of what we've been taught as taboo. So for sex as a sacred practice, drugs as Mother Nature's medicine, and music and dance as movement to connect us to our soul. So this is it: sacred sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And so today we have Becca Campbell here, and Becca is a coach and a guide, and she works specifically with women to connect with their flow state through multiple modalities that we'll talk into today. And she's also there to support women to access their innate intuitive gifts. So I'm so glad that you are here today, Becca. Thank you so much. I'd love if we just open into this space and hear you share really, what your work is to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Meg. I'm so excited to be here. I love that intro to what this series is all about. That's really, really cool. I especially love the rock and roll part because I love to dance. And that's definitely been probably the most powerful way that I've been connecting with the divine feminine lately. But in general, just to, I guess, speak into my work and how it has evolved a little bit, I definitely in the past have kind of really resonated with the idea of being a life coach and being a healer. But now I kind of really feel more that it's about activating people into their own self-healing and being more of an intuitive lifestyle mentor. Because honestly, I don't think there's anything more important right now than us really learning how to trust ourselves and learning how to follow our own inner wisdom and just be our own, really empowered as our own greatest healer. And I know myself, I spent so much of my life really disconnected from who I was, right? Like so many of us, we grow up, we're told we need to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z in order to be successful, in order to be good people. We come into all of these people pleasing tendencies and doing all of these things for everyone else. Like I grew up the oldest of 5 kids, and my mom had twins as a surprise when she was 40. I was 9 or 10 years old. And my role became helper. My role became put your needs, your emotions on the back burner so that you can help out. And I was happy to do that. It gave me a sense of feeling important and feeling like I had a purpose when maybe I was feeling a little bit lost at the time. But as I, came into adulthood, of course, and, got married and had kids of my own, I started to look at myself and be I'm really repeating, first of all, a lot of patterns that I saw in my mom, who never took time for herself, who was overwhelmed all the time, had no idea who she was or what she even liked. she was like always stressed out, and we were always feeling that. And I started to notice like those patterns like pretty much right away. But at the same time, literally exactly at the same time as I had my first baby and actually was just about to get married to my former high school sweetheart, who I'd reconnected with like after over a decade apart in this like crazy whirlwind of synchronicity. We just kind of like found ourselves leaping back into a relationship really quickly as adults. I left everything I knew, my job, like all my passions that I had finally come into, and I moved across the country to be with him, you know, like just that full on like soul, yes, this is what I'm doing, I'm going, blah, 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 it's all going to work out. Got pregnant right away. And simultaneously started going through this massive spiritual awakening, like this massive realization of what was going on in terms like all the patterning that I was carrying forward into parenting and into my relationship. And it was like all coming so fast and furious, and I had no idea what to do with it. And at the same time, like I also had tools. I had like training as a personal trainer and fitness instructor. I was really interested in, I had just done a yoga teacher training and was getting into meditation and understanding like the inner child aspect and all of these things. But I was having such a hard time actually doing the practices. I was having such a hard time actually slowing down enough and paying attention to what was going on in me because everything was so chaotic. And I guess you might say that kind of like opened up a gateway for me, because I realized that there was no way that I was going to survive, that my relationship was going to survive, and my parenting life was going to be super unpleasant. And I really didn't want to repeat like what I had observed my mother experience or her overwhelm and stress, and noticing, you know, how that had impacted me as an adult. And so I just really started to drop into this understanding intuitively and kind of logically as well, that I was the only one that could save me, and that I had to take full responsibility for everything that was coming up that was so uncomfortable. And that in order to do that, I had to learn how to be really present with myself and really honor the messages that my body was giving me, honor like the messages, the storylines that were running in my mind were giving me, and recognize that this wasn't so much about like reaching outside of myself for help, like, or even like, you know, reaching outside for spiritual guidance. It was more about being able to land fully in my body and be guided from within. Because for a long time, I was kind of like really activated. I could really, like looking back, like for example, I moved to the prairie, and I don't know if anyone's been to the prairie, but it's all sky. It's like open, blue sky, fluffy clouds, like the sky makes the prairie. And looking back, I realized that when I moved out here, my crown chakra really opened up, and I was receiving all of these downloads, but super overwhelmed with them. Like I didn't know what to do with any of it. So I was kind of in that space for probably several years, where I was just kind of floating around, and I didn't really feel like I could connect. I didn't really feel like I could communicate with people properly. I certainly couldn't communicate with my husband. And it was creating a lot of conflict in our relationship. I had told him just before we got married, we just had our baby and we were about to get married. And I was, you know, receiving all this guidance to start an online business. And I was going to teach yoga and take like my fitness training online. And he actually had a really negative reaction because he's a private guy, and he had all this old patriarchal programming playing out. And I could see that, but he couldn't. But still, it kind of like, it really shut me down in a lot of ways as well, because again, like I was stuck in that, right? I was stuck in this, okay, well, I have to make him comfortable and I have to keep everyone around me comfortable. And what I'm going through is like, nobody's going through this that I know right now. Like nobody is experiencing this. I don't know how to talk about it. But like, you know, it's been such a full circle journey, literally through all aspects of myself. And I've realized now, like, it all matters. Like we can talk about intuition, we can talk about spirituality, but like what's really sacred is like how all to me is how those all everything blends together, the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, and the energetics, and how we get to play with all of it as part of our experience when it comes to actually living that intuitive lifestyle and being tapped into our own self-healing potential. Because you can't, like, it's not fragmented, right? Like we can't just be like, oh, I'm going to take care of my physical health and well-being. Like I saw that with my personal training clients all the time. Oh, you're coming to me and you want to exercise and improve your nutrition, but you're seeing like no results because you're injured all the time and you can't keep a handle on the emotional eating, and your mind is insisting you can't do this and that to help yourself. Like all of these things were impeding them. And I was like, there's got to be something like more to this. And that definitely like sent me on that full circle journey. But now in my work, I love it because I'm able to support people with all of those things when it comes to them actually accessing what again is like not for me to like bring to them. It's just something that's being kind of lit from within inside of them. So I love the idea of being able to hold the space to not so much coach people, but illuminate what's already present for them, illuminate the shadow, illuminate the light, like let them see, reflect back to them their light and all of their wisdom and all of their magic so that they can see that and be really like the word activated is always coming up. Like I just see that flame, right? You see that spark of like, oh yeah, I know, like, we all know what's best for us. Like get to know your sacred yes and no. Like what does that feel like in your body? And how can you literally as simply as that be led from that space in everything that you do, in every decision that you make, including how we take care of ourselves? So I was like, okay, I'm not taking care of myself. First of all, I had to get to the bottom of why. Well, why? I didn't feel like I was worthy of the space. I didn't have the safety in my body. I was running from my anxiety that would come up, that was present, but was really present if I sat with it, which I think so many of us do. We go. We have all this conditioning to do, and prove. And we're like, we kind of blame our external circumstances because our external circumstances are very busy and they are very distracting. And it's very easily to get pulled into that. But what's really going on also is that we're running away from ourselves. And we are also just like stuck in these patterns of believing that we have to do all the things and we can't say no. And so that's been a big learning curve for me. And it's really been just as, like I said, it's so simple. It's been about like coming back to being able to find that safety, that spaciousness, that support within myself, and then lead from that space of, okay, I'm grounded, I'm safe, I'm connected, I've got this. Like it might be crazy and chaotic, but I know there's a purpose in it. I can see and feel the purpose and I can tap into the lessons. And I now know how to, and this is what I love helping clients with as well. It's like, I know how to digest the lessons to like digest that energy, because it's all just like this congestion, right? It's energetic and emotional congestion is how I view it in our body. And the first step to letting it move is to let it be and be present with it, right? Like we kind of all know that, but in practice, it becomes much more complex from our human perspective. So yeah, I don't know if that kind of answers or like is an appropriate lead in, but I just really feel passionate about helping people cultivate their own intuitive self-care routines, and whatever that looks like to them is perfect and always evolving and always changing. But to be able to really pay enough attention to what's going on within ourselves and actually ask ourselves what we need, and then to love ourselves enough to follow through on that feels like pretty much the biggest thing. Has been the biggest game changer for me personally, for sure.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's like so much in there that I'm just like, yes. I love how you were sort of spoke to like that accessing that whole of a person, right? Like instead of, I loved you use the word like fraction or fractal, of our being. Because I think especially as women, that's like one of the toxic traits we can get stuck in, is like getting caught in a role, like we are, wife, or we are mother, or, entrepreneur. And we just like live in this one fraction of all that we are. And that's just, I think we see more and more in the world right now, people realizing that these holistic approaches where we look at the whole, right? Like at the mind, body, soul aspect of our existence is necessary at this point. Like we can no longer just try to keep them separated. And even as you were saying, it's like, this is, the running from it. And and the go, 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 like it just perpetuates that divide from being able to be in a healthy, safe connection with our person. So I love that. And it's also speaks so much. Becca also has her own podcast called The Whole Vibe. And it's like, of course, this is what you do. So speaks to all of it. And even as you're speaking, it like in this conversation in general, like really focusing on the way the divine feminine is coming back into our remembrances. I think too, as women, we've also been really sort of directed to be more in our masculine and often toxic masculine. So I think a lot of us are coming back to this remembrance of how to be feminine. And when you're talking about like, the embodiment, like bringing it into our body, and that is the feminine, right? It's like the feminine is the body, it is the physical, it's the tangible, it's matter. So it's such a beautiful way to see how you have this focus. And I think when we talk about the whole, we're talking about, yes, how we embody the feminine. We're also talking about how we embody the masculine. So we have this, this balanced expression in our lives, which feels like that's super present when people work with you. I'd love to hear, like, for you specifically, how, like, what do you feel like is the ways that the divine feminine does weave into your work? You mentioned so many, but I'm just curious to highlight.
Yeah, definitely the gateway for me was like the stillness. And I know that a lot of people I talk to have a really like hard time with stillness. And so I don't necessarily mean to overemphasize the fact we have to be still, because intuitive movement would be the next thing on my list that I would say is something that I love to support people with in finding like their own flow with, but actually just like allowing our bodies and our voices, like ourselves. I feel like our movement and our sound are really important to let flow. Like, I just know that when I started like allowing myself to be more fully self-expressed, and that came from like being really just in such like deep self-love and trust. It just kind of came over time of just being like, okay, you know what, you're messy and life is messy, but you're okay. And like, you're doing a good job and you deserve to feel good. And you deserve to just like, let whatever wants to move through you out. And I feel like that's a big piece of the work that I do with people, is helping them feel more comfortable with like who they are and what they actually desire, and tapping into that creativity, which of course like is infinite in its like potential, how you want to interpret the word creativity. But I just see it as like every possible way you can express your authentic self and really let your soul speak through you. And another big piece of my work, and I don't want to forget to mention it because it's so huge, is that communion with nature and allowing Mama Gaia and all her beautiful creatures and living beings to like teach us and show us what our natural cycles look like, so that we can, like, in seeing that reflection, just be reminded that we're not meant to be on all the time, like, and we only bloom for certain periods, and there's a lot of mess that comes as we move through those cycles in order for us to grow and evolve the way that we're designed to. And the feminine, of course, is that more restful energy, is kind of that surrender that I feel like is so challenging for so many of us, because we just really want to control, and we want to know how everything's going to work out, and we want to know like that it's going to be okay, instead of being able to kind of just soften into ourselves and be like, okay, well, again, like, what do I actually need right now? What's going to be the most nourishing? How can I fill my cup so that I am in at least some kind of like reasonable level of filled up, ideally an overflow, but at some capacity, I have actually got energy to give. I've actually got something to give, instead of just like trying to give from a place of complete depletion. And like I say, everything that comes through it's funny because like I call it my work, but it doesn't feel like work. I know you relate to this. It's like my work. Okay. But it's not really my work. It's who I am and what I share and what my message is and how I like hold and support people that feel called to come into space with me. But it definitely doesn't feel like work. It definitely feels purposeful, but it really like, there's so many things. Like I love crystals. I love nature. I love like the intuitive movement and the sound. Light language has been huge for me. Like I never in a million years would have been like, oh yeah, I channel light language. Like never would have thought that that was a thing until it just started happening. And now I'm like driving and I'm like, could be channeling light language. I'm like, what is even going on? But I feel like what happens is like when we start to like come into that place of really deep connection with ourselves and our core nature, which is divine, right? Like I really feel like self-love is the ultimate expression and embodiment of our divine nature, because we're like, oh, hey, I'm divine. Oh, right. Well, I am love. Therefore, I have to love myself. And loving myself doesn't mean like always having super positive thoughts and feelings and actions towards myself, but it does involve like loving myself and all of my disaster like that happens, like loving myself, all of the pieces, again, like the whole self, right? The shadow and the light, we talk about it all the time. But I love supporting people in that shadow work, quote unquote, aspect, because it's just like, oh, right, all of those things that I didn't like about myself, that I didn't even realize I didn't like about myself, that are like now, so that have been actually the source of all of the triggers in my experience. Like if I can now look at all of the challenge and all of the friction and be like, oh, that's just a sign that there's some like part of myself probably tucked away in a little closet somewhere, probably like a little inner child, like hiding and not feeling safe and supported and heard and understood and accepted for who they truly are. Like if I can just recognize that, and even if in the moment I don't have the time to like dip into where that's coming from, it just softens everything. I find like it's just like, oh, it's not really about me being like a horrible person and having no control. It's actually about my experience trying to teach me where I can lean into the divine feminine aspect of myself a little bit or a lot more, and spend some time with myself, give myself some space for pleasure and play, whatever, like pay attention. I feel like a lot of us right now are being so called to tap into like the divine feminine aspect in terms of like our intuition and following what feels really good, and like the creativity and play and pleasure and all of that as part of our soul purpose. Again, like air quotes, like our soul purpose, and whatever, you know, obviously our soul purpose is here to just like, can be very simple. Like whatever we're doing is part of our soul purpose, but also like to amplify that, like what brings us joy and how can we be of the highest service? Well, what brings us joy? Like what are we being called into? And I saw like, you know, there's so many stats on socials and who knows like where these things come from, but something about 20% of people leaving the matrix and stepping into soul work, like as we're evolving and waking up and whatever. And I feel like this has got to mean like that there's so many of us out there that are like, okay, I really am ready to do something completely new, completely different. And it's scaring the shit out of people because they're like, I don't know how to do this. Like there's going to be like ego at every turn is going to be like, no, who are you to do that? What are you doing? Stay safe, stay small. And unless we're connected to our soul, unless we're like, you know, using those practices that allow us to be really anchored in our body and out of our head, right? Because we know that ego is mostly our mind, and like our soul or divine feminine, whatever you want, like whatever terms we want to kind of use, is really more about being so present in our body and letting like everything that is wanting to move through us, not holding on to it, not repressing it, not like thinking that it's not good enough, which again, like is totally normal, but it's about knowing like, even if this is raw and messy and I don't know how it's going to work out, I know that I'm held and supported through this because I trust myself to take those steps. And even if there's if it's not going to work out the way that I think it's going to work out, I'm still moving in the direction that my inner guidance is inviting me into. So it's naturally just going to feel more in flow anyway. And I do feel like the divine feminine is about that. It's about like tapping into that flow and allowing ourselves to like navigate life with less friction and honor the messages that the experience is giving us, but that requires slowing way down. And I think that honestly, a lot of the time when people come to me at first, that seems to be like the most prevalent thing that we practice initially is like slowing down and learning how to feel safe in the body, because the body's holding all of these messages. And if we can't be safe in the body, then we can't really receive the messages. That's just my personal opinion. Anyway, so yeah, does that answer your question? I kind of get off on these tangents.
I know, it's so good. I just want to keep letting you just go. And I love that. As I listen to you speak into it all too, I'm like, oh, you like, it really is. You're just speaking so much about how we do come to that place where we feel safe, where we feel balanced, where things don't feel, like one extreme or the other. Because yes, you're so right. Like we are divine, but we also are human. And so like, we're not just ever going to get to a point in our lives where that just stops, right? There's no point where like there might be a point in time where things feel perfect, but it's not going to ever stay like that forever. And it's like, how can we, like you said, have those toolkits to like our tools or our practices to be able to navigate and come back into balance. And I just love the way you speak into the feminine and of course, like this surrender piece, but like, it was interesting because you'd said like like what you felt like was the gateway in was like coming to stillness, and stillness is is masculine. Like that's our healthy masculine, is when we can come to stillness and pause and meditation. Like it seems like that's not masculine traits, because like masculine tends to be like the action and the doing. But I think you're painting such a good picture of like, this is the balance. Like when we can give when our feminine feels safe to trust the holding and the support of our inner masculine, but also like the world, like you'd said, right? Like we can be in the shit and the chaos and still know that it's actually still working out for us. But that piece of like trusting that we are held and supported, which is just such a beautiful picture of this, is that union we can get to with our inner masculine and feminine together. So, I mean, like, to me, it's just like, this is why this work is absolutely so important. And the parts where you're talking about too, like when you were talking about your own experience and you were in that place where there's nobody else, like, who can I talk to? Like, no one's going to understand what I'm going through. But what you were pointing out now is like, there's so many people who like going through these like rapid, like awakening processes. And even for you, again, describing, and I love again, as you were like, it's all sky here. And like sky to me is like father sky, again, the masculine energy. So having such an open connection to that energy, and that's what can happen. That in itself, like all of this new knowing or remembrance or these insights, and yeah, that is going to be either super overwhelming and you're just like, I need everything to slow down. Like, I don't know what's happening right now. Again, why you need those tools to come to that balance so you can like receive and process what's coming through. But this is also why what you're doing is so, so powerful, is because there's just so many people out there right now feeling still likely like they're completely alone and no one's going to understand what they're going through, when that's not the case. Like, you're not the only one. Like, let's speak and communicate and connect with others, and not go through it alone. And that support to be able to slow down and like you said, begin to access that information that wants to come to you, so you can actually use it as the tools in your purpose. And like, as you were talking about, it's so weird to call it work because it just feels like purpose, or like how you get to be of service. But that's, all that information is that intuitive wisdom to move you forward to the next step. And so, yeah, if we can't slow down to hear it, then again, it's just perpetuates that divide. So this is just, it's so cool to hear you sharing this. And really, I think it truly just anchors into the importance of why it is super important, you know, to give yourself that space for self-love. Because I think sometimes like people think, well, it's not really important. Like I've got to do the A, B, C, D first is really important, but actually self-love is super important, and like learning how to create the space and learning how to slow down so that you can come back into alignment with what you're here for. I'm kind of going like back to something you had said, because again, you'd shared a lot sort of about sort of where your work was birthed from, but I'm kind of curious too. Do you feel that when you had kids, do you also think that that was sort of because of the chaos of like a new phase of life, kind of? Do you think that that was a big influence on like just that like light going off for you that, oh my gosh, like I need to change something here?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think that there was like a few things, because for one, so I'll just kind of break this down in a timeline because this will kind of help it make more sense, I think. So my husband and I like reconnected, like, I don't even remember what year. It was like December. We saw each other at home at Christmas time. We're both from Prince Edward Island. He was living out west. I was living in Toronto at the time. And we had connected on Facebook. He had reached out to me and we just had been having some conversation, whatever. Decided to see each other at home at Christmas time. So we saw each other then. And then from there, I won't get into like the story of that in itself would blow your mind. I have it on the podcast, but I won't like go into it right now. But we had like 8 months of long distance relationship. He came to see me in Toronto twice. I went out west to visit him for like a week in the spring. And then I was moving there in August. So August, I moved out west. October, I went to do a yoga teacher training in Montreal for a month. And then during that training, all of my inner child wounds came up, like all of them. It was so intense, like so intense. And I already had quite a bit of awareness, like around how some of my early childhood experience were shaping me in terms of like some social anxiety I was having and like a bunch of stuff that was going on. I had a really bad eating disorder as a teenager. I like, just like all of these things were coming up, all of these insecurities. I sat in that teacher training for a month, and aside of like maybe 1 or 2 people I felt comfortable talking to, I talked to no one. I never asked a question. I just soaked it all in. I didn't feel like I had to ask questions, to be honest. You know how when you're in stuff like that, you're just getting the information you need, but whatever. So I come back the end of October. I'm like now trying to find a job because I don't have work. Small town, not a lot of my industry. I do eventually find a job working at a women's gym. It was super aligned. They were like wanting, and this actually kind of ties into like where I got into like the dancing is like part of my stuff, because they wanted someone to teach Zumba at this gym, and they were going to pay for someone to go to the teacher training. And just so happened that that was the next thing on my list that I wanted training in to be able to teach. I'd never taught anything like that before. I was not a comfort zone for me. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, this is amazing. And my boss was like just the sweetest woman. So I go to like my first official day of training at this job, and I had been home for Christmas. No, this was in January. I had been home for Christmas and I wasn't feeling well over Christmas break. I was like, I feel like I'm like PMSing like crazy, and people kept being like, are you sure you're not pregnant? Are you sure you're not pregnant? I'm like, no, of course, it's just normal for me, la, la, la. So I come back after my Christmas holidays and started this job. Sorry. So a month went where I had no work, and then whatever. Started this job, and the first day I went to work in the morning, and on the way home, I'm like, I'm going to just get a pregnancy test, because I'm just going to like get it out of my mind. It's fine. I'm not pregnant. And my husband was like, wait for me to get home from work to do that test. And I was like, whatever. So I go and I pee on that stick, and it is instantly positive. And I mean, instantly. So I like lost my mind and cried and like all the things. And I just started this job. This woman was like actually like feeling like I was someone that could come and buy this gym. And like I had felt all of this responsibility around the job I had just started. Oh my God, I'm just pregnant. And I have nobody here, and I have no support system. And my husband's at work every day, and I'm not ready to have a baby, even though I'm in my 30s. Like I just like all of the things, right? And I go to work the next day, and I'm like, well, I obviously told my husband over text because I couldn't hold it in. And he comes home and like I cry and cry and cry. And we go get another pregnancy test. And this time it's one of the clear blue ones that tells you how far along you are. So it's like three weeks. I'm like, oh my God, this is insane. And I go to work the next day and my boss is like trying to teach me stuff. And I'm like, I can't focus. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I was like so upset. I just found out I was pregnant. And she was like, that's amazing. Oh my God. She was so excited for me and it completely flipped my perspective. So number one, super grateful for that. But, fast forward, had a really amazing pregnancy. I'm taught Zumba the whole way through until like 38 weeks, which was must have been quite the sight. But anyway, because I was humongous. And then had my son and pretty much immediately like started to, again, like just get that awareness around, okay, so if my parents passed along all of this stuff to me, all of these beliefs that I've been trying to unravel, and all of those, like these tendencies and all of these behaviors and all of that reactivity that like I experienced as a kid that like imprinted me emotionally so deeply, that's going to just continue to be passed along unless I figure that out. Like that's just going to happen. There's not really any way that I'm not going to do that. So I didn't feel like I had a choice, honestly. Like I was seeing what was going on in my relationship, and like our high school relationship had ended very, I hope I'm answering your question because I feel like I might be on a total tangent, but it ended very abruptly and it was very painful for both of us. And there was no like reconciliation around it. There was just like a parting of ways, and then that was that. And so imagine now, knowing what we know now about energy and emotions, coming back to that relationship into adulthood, not knowing each other as adults, with all of the baggage that we've picked up in between, plus all of this baggage that we had from our young love breakup. And I was looking at my life and I'm like, this is a shit show. Like I felt like I didn't have a choice, but I also felt like I had been given a beautiful gift because I realized that I was here to be a cycle breaker. And I didn't quite understand when that initial awareness dropped in, the magnitude of what that meant and how like this stuff that I talk about, like being like living an intuitive lifestyle and being tapped into my own self-healing all the time and taking radical responsibility for what my experience is teaching me. I didn't realize the depth and the breadth of what that was going to look like, and that it would literally become a daily practice. Like I feel like my job is generational healing. Like I feel like every day I get up, and whether I'm like screaming at my kids or whether I'm super patient, in some capacity, I am doing deep healing work for myself, for my family, and my lineage. And I think that sometimes when we talk about soul work, we're like, oh, it's like this thing that's kind of outside of maybe if we happen to like have a family, like in a kind of traditional context. And I'm really only speaking from my experience, but just know that I'm honoring all of the ways that this can look. But like we tend to think, okay, we are going to do this really different, amazing thing, which it often is. But that thing can't happen without the foundation, has been my experience. Like I couldn't step into doing the quote unquote work that I do without the foundation, without like, whether or not my husband, for example, was super supportive, without untangling myself from his beliefs around it and reclaiming my sovereignty within that, right? Without unhooking from all of my children's emotions, which that's really hard. Like, I'm not going to say that's easy, but like, it becomes more about like, how am I being in my day-to-day life? Because for me, my practice, it like, in terms of like how I help people, it has everything to do with how I'm showing up in my day-to-day life and my ability, first of all, to hold them, like to even have the space to hold those people, but also like, that's life. Like, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to have a human experience and have a family and have a partner and kids that are constantly like helping me learn lessons. Like, that's what I believe I signed up for. And some days I'm like, oh my God, this is so much. Just let me go to work and have a regular job and I'll just like ignore all my feelings like most people do. I just think that would be so much easier some days, but I would never trade it because I think it's so exciting what we get to do. And that's what I really feel like I want to, the energy of what I want to hold people in is just coming into that space of like, you don't need to run away from your experience right now. You don't need to like be gone for weeks or months of the year to be able to tend to your own needs and actually like follow through on what your soul is asking you to do. It's about integrating all of the parts and all of the facets of like what we came here to be and experience. So the more I feel that the more we can be kind of tapped into our spiritual self, but through our physical experience, through what's happening in our experience versus like, I'm going to go into meditation and connect with like, this is great and everything. And I love doing this, but connect with whatever, receive all of the information from my guides, which I do in my work. Like I believe that's very valuable, but I also make sure that it's like coupled with that very grounded, practical, like, okay, how do we integrate this into the conflict I'm experiencing in my relationship, for example? Like I do a lot of work with people around relationships because I've been through so much in mine. Like my husband and I probably shouldn't still be married from a perspective of we've had so much crap and I'm the only one doing the work. Like he goes to work every day. He runs 2 businesses. He holds like the masculine energy in our household so beautifully, like so beautifully. He's such an amazing provider and protector, and he's always thinking of ways to support us more deeply in that respect. But he has no interest in feeling his feelings. He has no interest at looking at like where he's like holding beliefs and all that stuff. So what I've come to realize is like, I can't change him, but there's a lot of work I can do on myself. Like all the work I've done on myself has 1,000% saved our marriage, like 1,000%. And on top of that, there's work that I can do in the quantum field that can actually impact our relationship. Like I can actually converse with, for example, his higher self. We can actually like have a conversation, and then that makes the human conversations a lot easier. So I love being able to bridge and merge all of it because I just think that's where we're going. Like I really believe that's it for me anyway.
Yeah. It's just so beautiful. I actually makes me laugh. It's like, I actually don't think we should be together still, probably, but because of the work. And this is, and it's the same, like I hear so many women say this, and I just think too, this is such a great example of like why it's so important to show up and be present in doing the work. And like you said, every single day. And because by you doing that, like our partners do see it, like our partners see the change in us, and that's something that they understand. They also understand, when it feels like things in a relationship are like kind of hitting the fan, that it's like, there's like your capacity, right, to be able to actually hold space or to not completely like blow. Like, I know for me, that's one of the things, like, like I would, like my tea kettle would totally blow. Like, like sometimes I don't even feel like the triggers are like, I can keep them under control. Like they don't just blow anymore. And it holds, that just creates so much expansion in the relationship. Like, whoa, we can actually talk about something now instead of just like fury on each other. So I think it's just, that's so valuable. Just speaking into like, this is how powerful it is to show up and do the work. And again, I think, if anyone is listening and like hearing these pieces that you're speaking to, like, the pieces of, I'm here to be a cycle breaker, because I feel like that was really powerful when you said that. Like, I so resonate with that. I 100% am here. I know that's part of my purpose in this lifetime. And if you're listening and that to be a cycle breaker, if you feel like you're the black sheep in your family, that feeling like you spoke into of like being tired, knowing, like waking up every day, knowing that something has to change and that it's within you to make the choice to do that. Like, please reach out and contact Becca, because those are all the signals. And even when you were talking about like how you kind of like how your path was unfolding, like those synchronicities of like having this paid training that would just happen to be present for you, like those things don't just happen by surprise for us. Like we can think that they're just happening by surprise and super convenient, but it's because you are in alignment with what you're supposed to be doing. So like, I just think those pieces, as you're speaking to that, if that's really resonating with anyone who's listening, like this is the day, this is the conversation where we're going like, yes, this is more than just coincidence. And yes, this is the invitation to step into it. And 100% like contact Becca. And this is the sort of thing, like, this is the
Here for
opportunity.
it.
Yeah. Right. Reach out, whether it's just aligning with your story, you know, like open the conversation.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for that. And I just really like also want to remind us like our children, if we happen to have children, they're the generation that's coming up to like inherit this new earth. And I've got 3 boys. They are wild, they are busy, they are like amazing. They pull me out of my comfort zone in so many ways, but they really, really challenge me. But at the same time, I look at them and I look at like the toxic masculinity, for example, that's kind of like infiltrated my relationship. And like, you know, again, grateful for the healing work I've been able to do around that. But I'm like, these boys will not like carry that forward. Like I am committed to them being these like emotionally intelligent beings, for one thing, like being able to like process their emotions. And I'm certainly not a perfect mother. Like I said, they're loud and crazy, and right now they do not want to listen to me, and I'm like navigating my way through that and what that all like looks like and is trying to teach me, because it's just life. It's just like real life. But I really look at children, and I like look at the level even of like mental health struggles in children. And you know, yeah, a lot of it's coming from environment, and a lot of it's coming from like just all the things that are going on right now. But predominantly we're like, especially as mothers, I believe we hold the frequency in our household. I believe that we are the anchoring energy for the most part in our household. And everything that's going on in it isn't our fault necessarily. I'm not saying that, but it's like, we're connected to it all. And sometimes it's a matter of like, okay, well, how can I be less tangled up in my child's emotions about a certain event, because they're their own person and they have to have their own journey, and like these are the experiences they're going to have, and my job is to like support them really, I feel like, in their own empowerment of like kind of navigating that, and of course give them the love and compassion and, you know, all of the things that they need that most of us didn't get as kids, because our parents didn't take that on as responsibility. Our emotional well-being was not part of what they were told was their responsibility. And I think for me, that was a big thing when it came to like healing some stuff with my parents, who were amazing, but there was some stuff for sure. It was like, oh yeah, they never learned that and they never received that. And now again, like with this cycle breaking thing that we're doing, we get to like shift that. We get to teach our kids how to be these self-trusting, you know, like emotionally connected humans without like all of the shame that we got for having our feelings felt and expressed. Yeah, but I feel like that's a really, really important piece. And I feel like it's an important piece because a lot of the time we tend to like put our desires aside, or put what we're wanting to do in terms of like our personal growth, or, you know, anything that we're being kind of called to invest in ourselves through. And I hear people say all the time, well, I don't have the money for that because my kids things cost all of this, or the money's there, the money's here. And it's not time for that because I'm too busy with the kids stuff and whatever. And I'm like, that I get that. I so get that. And that's all good and all great. But I think sometimes it's really important for us to take a look at where all of those beliefs and all that tendency to self-sacrifice and martyr ourselves and put all of the emphasis on like everything that our children need, which is important. Obviously, those things are important, and forget about ourselves and forget that we're the ones like leading the charge. We're the ones that are like impacting everything within them going forward, even if it's just the energy that we're holding. I recently got this is just a sidebar because we're talking about energy, but a Healy device. These Healy frequency devices. Have you heard of these? Mm-hmm. So I've started using them on myself, obviously using it on myself, and I've been using it on my kiddos just a bit. I'm nowhere, like haven't dove deep into it at all yet, but it's just really interesting to see. When I did, like, for instance, the aura scans on all of us, there was some major coherence in our aura scans. Like they were not exactly the same, but like where we were low and versus high, they were all the same. And just like, okay, like here's evidence that like how connected our energy is. That's not a coincidence, right? They've all got different stuff going on, but we're all in the same household. And yeah, I'm the primary with the kids in my household, so they're exceptionally connected to me. So yeah, I just think it's really important to remember that ripple effect that we're creating when we do the work. Like, it's so vast and so infinite, and we're only beginning to like understand what that even looks like. And as we're like building this new earth, it just feels really important to know that and remember that our children need healthy, happy, like connected parents, like, or parent, or what, like caregivers, whatever the case may be. Like, those kids need us to take care of ourselves. And if we're not, we're doing them a disservice. And not, again, doesn't mean that we're bad parents if we're struggling with that. But I just feel like that's one of the most important things that I've come into in my own life, and through the people that do seem to be drawn to work with me, is it becomes, okay, I need to start to prioritize myself and trust myself, and emulate the, like, literally the energy that we want to bring through in creating this whole new reality we are creating together. So yeah.
That choice piece. And again, like speaking to that self-sovereignty and the independence, and like the powers within you is so important. But I think that also emphasizes like everything comes down to your choice, to what you're choosing. And that's what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to. And that piece, I love that piece around, because I think every single person has probably at some point said, I really wish I could do this, but I can't afford it. And that's a choice. Like, that is our choice. And that's our no. And that's fine sometimes. But, if it really is a purpose, and if it really is something that you're choosing towards, like if this new earth and these new communities and new ways of being in your own body are truly something that you desire, we have to say yes at some point. And I understand how real it is sometimes to feel like money is the block, but again, there's so much more underneath there. And the way I love looking at that too is like, it's not like, clients choosing to come to work with you, or like, when it's working with me, like, it's not about the services that we provide are not about us.
Right.
It's like it's not, if your answer is you can't afford it, that's not about me. It's about you. And that's the self-investment, and is this change and the impact and the ripple effect, that you're talking about. Are you worth it? It comes down to that, like, and this is, it is that big, worthiness piece, which is connected to the self-love, which is connected to our history and to our families and our communities. So, but I really love that piece, because I think when we can also look at it and talk about it like that, again, it really does put that responsibility on each of us, whether, because, I know you and we're continually working with mentors, because it's something that really helps, to make these big changes, because it is hard to change. And it's hard to stay accountable, and it's hard to stay in that, like, oh yeah, I do believe this big grand vision that I see. And for me, mentors have been so super important. And it's a choice. And it's, like you said, it's our personal self-responsibility. So just with sort of talking around that, I would love to hear, like, what do you think is the most, what feels the most important for your clients when they're working with you?
It really, I love that you brought up the worthiness piece, because I feel like it boils down to the recognizing where we don't actually feel we are worthy in general, whether we don't feel we're worthy of like taking the 5 minutes for ourselves, or we don't feel we're worthy of making the investment right? Like wherever we're at on the spectrum, or where we feel like we are not enough because our household is, I'll just use the example again of household because that's just my reality, or because our household feels like it's not perfect, or we can't like keep things clean and we can't keep track of all the schedules and like everything's not perfect, right? I'm definitely a recovering perfectionist, and that came out hugely when I became a parent. But yeah, just like the worthiness and the self-love and trust, like being able to recognize where we are not in alignment with that, and to also like love ourselves through that. I don't want to say misalignment because I don't really think it's a misalignment. It's just like a realignment, a choice. Again, like you say, like everything is a choice. And I feel like that might hurt some people's feelings to hear, but I do believe that. Sometimes I say it to myself and it hurts my own feelings to hear, but I still believe it. But yeah, to really recognize where we are, where again, like our experience is showing us where we don't feel like we're enough, where we don't feel like we're worthy, and be able to cultivate that self-love and worthiness from within, whether that looks like actually like diving into the emotional and energy work, which mindset I feel like is really important, but I feel like the mindset gets a lot easier when we like dig at the emotions and energy first. But yeah, that would be like, if that answers your question, that would be like the main focus, because I feel like once you have that self-love and worthiness anchored, everything else feels a lot easier. Like, yeah, it ebbs and flows for sure. It's not, we don't feel like that 100% of the time, but the way you show up in conversation is different. The way that you interact with your children or your coworkers or whatever is going to be different, because you're not so, you don't take things so personally. Like if the kids are acting up, it's not personal. Like, I know I'm enough. I know I'm doing enough. Like, I know I'm worthy of like taking a step away and having a break and giving myself whatever it is I need. They'll be okay, or whatever. Like, I just find that has been like the biggest thing in me even taking care of myself, period. Like I said at the beginning, where I was like, I have all the skills, I know all the things, I understand, I would preach this, but then I couldn't do it myself. There was so much resistance. The resistance was because I didn't feel like I was worthy of it.
Right.
I didn't feel like I was doing enough, and therefore I wasn't allowed, whoever said that, I don't know, but I wasn't allowed to do things. Like the resistance was so strong. And that's what the underlying belief was when I finally got down to it, was that, oh, I don't feel like I'm worthy, and I don't feel like I'm safe. I don't feel like I'm supposed to do these things because I'm supposed to do all the mom stuff and all the homemaker stuff first. Because I stayed home. I didn't have like a career so much to go back to when I knew I wanted to have my own business. I stayed home with my kids because I could. And wasn't that supposed to be the thing that everybody wanted, right? Like how fortunate was I? Like how kind of spoiled was I, because I got to stay home with my kids and I didn't have to go to work. Meanwhile, like I was like, I want to go to work and have a lunch break. I want to sit with you, adults, and drink coffee. But I shamed myself so badly for it, because I was like, I'm supposed to feel differently. I'm not supposed to feel like this. Like I really invalidated my feelings so much. And yeah, when I got to like the crux of it all, it was like, oh, I don't feel like I'm worthy, and I'm not safe to receive this. People are going to judge me. Again, it was like childhood stuff. They're going to judge me for like being lazy and entitled and whatever, like all of these things. And my husband thinks that too, like all, our brain just is like makes out, especially as women. Oh my gosh, the stories our mind and ego will tell us, right? About our place in the world and how everyone else is feeling about us and all of that garbage. all of the non-truths most of the time.
Yeah. And I think that's such a huge point that you bring up too, is because that is what we want. That's like why we ended up in that situation, is we wanted to be able to be with our kids and work from home. But the reality is, like, what does that look like? Like, that's not an easy choice to make, because like you want to be there for your family and you also want to be there for your business. So it's like literally like trying to determine like, how does that look in our household, where I can be giving the energy that I desire to be giving to both of these without sacrificing one or the other. I know that through those years in the pandemic, like that was really hard on my relationship with my husband. Like it looked a lot like working 7 days a week sometimes. And it looked like working 7 days a week, like like 18-hour days, like I don't even know. And but we're lazy. We're working those 18-hour days and we are still getting judged as lazy. And it's, like work, like starting work when at 4, when my husband would get home, and I'm working like from 4 until 9 with clients. And then also like, hey, I need some space at the end, to like unwind. And yeah, it's crazy, but this is, again, I think weaves into like the woman's capacity to be creative. And it's a really great example of, yes, actually we can say yes to some of the things where we feel we say no based on, I love that piece that you had brought in, like, well, who told us this anyways? That's a really, really valid question to ask often, like around these beliefs that we have, is like, actually, who told me that? And are they a valid person to have even told me that in the first place?
How did it work out for them, even if that was the choice that they made? Like,
exactly. Yeah. Or did they even make that choice? Yeah. So valid. Oh my goodness. This is we could just talk about this forever. I love this conversation. For people who are feeling really inspired and motivated and connected to what you have been sharing, do you have any programs coming up, and how can people get in touch with you?
thanks for that. And yes, this conversation has been amazing. Thank you so much for inviting me on for this chat. I'm so grateful. I actually have just been kind of like reorganizing my offers and how things are wanting to come through. And I definitely have space, first of all, for like one-on-one, one-off sessions. I do a hybrid of illumination coaching and quantum healing, because I like to address all of it. So I do have like one-off sessions. I have ongoing mentorship. I have one space open in that right now. And I also have a membership that hasn't quite launched yet. I'm literally like working on anchoring in. The details are there, but I'm just finishing up the page. So you can definitely follow me or reach out to me for access to that when it is done. But there is a 3-tiered membership where you can come in at purely like a self-study level, or a group coaching and healing level, or a private mentorship level. So that's kind of giving you a bunch of extras, kind of umbrellaed. They kind of build on each other. So I'm not explaining it super well, but I love it because it gives people lots of options price point wise to come in and receive support. Like even the base level membership, you get a group quantum healing within that, which in itself is definitely like worth the investment of that membership. So that will be launching really, really soon. I'm not going to do a huge fancy launch for it. I'm just going to open the doors. So if you're interested in that, definitely reach out to me. And I'm also going to be running a program. I do not have the exact start date yet, but it will be in the next month or so, called Flow Activator. And that is actually going to be about taking you through all aspects of self. So it's going to be a journey through the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and energetic, to accessing your most optimal flow state. So your highest accessible vibration, by addressing like all aspects of being. It'll be a 5-week group program. So that is definitely coming up. It's been on my heart to bring through for months now, and it's feeling like it's time. I will say there's been, when you talk about like integrating your quote unquote work into living your regular life. For me, it's been such a dance. Like, and I spoke to having like this epiphany like many, many times, where without the foundation, because like I've spoke to, like my relationship has been like a beautiful healing experience, but quite rocky. Like it really was hard for me to anchor in my work until I had the relationship, the safety in the relationship. And so I only say that in case there's anyone listening who's wondering why they can't like gain any traction in the direction that they're wanting to go, if they're experiencing that level of friction and just general discourse in their relationship. There's so many ways we can, first of all, just untangle ourselves from the energy of that and then begin to heal it by healing ourselves first. And I feel like that's probably my most important kind of focus and message, that just feels very important to say, because I think like as we're also going through this ascension journey in general, like we're all changing and evolving so much, right? And that can cause a lot of upheaval in relationships as we kind of start to get to know each other as different people, and or a lot of relationships are also dissolving right now. And I think that's important to acknowledge as okay as well. And I'm definitely here in supporting people through that. And whatever like whatever space and whatever phase they are within relationships, I just feel like I've got some really powerful support around that if anybody needs it. So yeah, you can come in and work with me in lots of different ways, and feel free to reach out to me for more details around that. And then on socials, if you want to follow along, I am on Instagram and TikTok at Becca Campbell Coaching. Those are kind of the two main places I'm playing. I'm also on Facebook, but that's kind of like just kind of a sidebar. But I am under Becca Campbell on Facebook as well, mainly because I'm not the Hay House author Rebecca Campbell, and people kept mistaking me for her, which is super flattering. Like, they follow me for months and then be like, "Oh, you're not her." And I'm like, "Okay, thanks for liking all of my things. I'm glad that you like feel really resonant with me." But no, I'm not. Maybe one day I'll be a Hay House author, but not today.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the right field of work, so
Yeah.
perhaps you're channeling some of it somehow. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for just sharing your story and sharing, like speaking so authentically to your journey and like the influence that this work has had on your life. I think I know so much of it resonates for me. And I think it's so beautiful because, again, just in the ways that your work is having a ripple impact out into communities in the world it's really, really exciting knowing that there is space to come and receive a level of support that I think is deeper than what many of us, I'm getting goosebumps, but many of us have experienced in our entire lifetimes. So thank you so much for just being brave and courageous and choosing to do, the work that isn't always feel like the easy work, and for being someone to hold that space for others is just such a gift. So thank you for being you.
Thank you. Back at you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So, I will catch up with you soon. And I hope that, for anyone, again, if there's anything that was really resonating for you as you were listening to Rebecca speak today, that you reach out and connect with her, whether it's just to say hi or whether to ask more about her services. And we will be back for another episode of Sacred Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll next month, always the last Wednesday of the month. So make sure you're in the group Sacred Sexuality, Her Pleasure Prophecy, so you can be there to catch it, or join us here on YouTube. All right. Thanks so much, Becca. Have an amazing day.